In the glittering world of New York's elite, one name whispered in fear was not a CEO or a politician, but a wife, Serafina Vanderbilt. She was the queen of high society, and her power was absolute. She could destroy a reputation with a single glance, end a career with one phone call. Everyone who was anyone bowed to her until she walked into the wrong restaurant. This is the story of how one ordinary waitress, a young woman with nothing to lose and a secret she'd guarded for years, did the impossible. She didn't just stand up to the most feared woman in the city. She made her look like a fool in front of everyone. And it was only the beginning. The air at Ethel was different. It wasn't just air. It was a curated atmosphere circulated at a perfect 71 degrees, carrying the faint expensive scents of white truffle, vintage Dom Perignon, and the bespoke perfume of its clientele. Located in a discreet, unmarked townhouse in the Upper East Side, Ethel was less a restaurant and more a sanctuary for the global 1%. It had a 2-year waiting list, unless, of course, you were a Vanderbilt. For the Vanderbilts, there was always Table 1. When the heavy oak doors opened on a Tuesday evening, a hush didn't fall over the dining room. It was sucked out. Serafina Vanderbilt had arrived. She didn't just walk. She glided, a panther in a custom Dior navy silk sheath that shimmered like a freshly drawn blade. Her black hair was pulled into a chignon so severe it seemed to defy gravity. Her diamonds, the infamous Vanderbilt ice, were not gaudy. They were terrifying in their clarity. They were weapons. Beside her, looking perpetually distracted and slightly rumpled in his brown suit, was her husband, Arthur Vanderbilt, the man whose name was plastered across half the investment banks in the city. Matteo, the maitre d', a man who had stared down health inspectors and scornful New York Times critics without flinching, visibly paled. He rushed forward, bowing slightly. "Mrs. Vanderbilt, Mr. Vanderbilt, your table is prepared." Serafina didn't look at him. Her gaze swept the room, a monarch inspecting her territory. Her eyes landed on a table of tech billionaires celebrating a merger. They were laughing. Serafina's lip curled just slightly. The laughter died instantly. This was her power. She was the arbiter, the gatekeeper. She didn't just sit on boards, she controlled them. She chaired the Met Gala, the New York Philharmonic Ball, and most importantly, the Vanderbilt Family Foundation, a charitable leviathan that gave her the moral high ground from which to execute her social assassinations. A bad word from Serafina, and your invitation to Davos was lost. Your children's application to Brearley was misfiled. Your credit line at Chase Private Client was suddenly under review. She was, in a word, feared. As she was seated, she snapped her finger, not at a person, but at the air. A young busboy, barely 19, rushed forward to fill her water glass. "Evian!" she snapped, her voice low and cold. "Not this tap." "Madame," Matteo stammered, "this is San Pellegrino, imported." "It's not? Are you calling me a liar?" The busboy froze. Matteo looked sick. At once, Mrs. Vanderbilt, in a shadowed alcove near the service station, Elena Sanchez watched. She was new, 6 weeks at Ethel. She had been warned about Serafina. She had been drilled on her. Elena was, by all appearances, unremarkable. Her uniform was pristine, her dark hair tied back in a simple, severe bun that ironically mirrored the Queen's. She was 25, quiet, and possessed a stillness that unnerved the other staff. While they skittered and panicked, Elena simply watched. She watched Serafina dismiss the sommelier's recommendation with a wave of her hand. "Bring me the 1990 Romane Conti, and don't you dare try to pass off a Latache." She watched her critique the art on the wall, a genuine de Kooning on loan. "It's so derivative," she sighed, loud enough for the artist's grandson sitting 2 tables away to hear. Elena felt the familiar cold knot tighten in her stomach. It wasn't fear, it was something else. It was the ice-cold burn of recognition. "Sanchez," Matteo whispered, rushing past her. "You are on table 7. Do not make eye contact with table 1. Do not walk past table 1 unless you must. If she speaks to you, you are deaf, dumb, and blind. I handle her. Only me." Elena nodded, her face a perfect mask of neutrality. "Yes, Matteo?" But as she turned to retrieve a bottle of wine for her own table, her eyes met Serafina Vanderbilt's across the room. It was for less than a second. Serafina's gaze was one of utter dismissal. The look one gives an insect on the wall, a flicker of annoyance before the inevitable squash. Elena didn't look away. She held the gaze, her expression unreadable. Serafina was the first to break contact, raising an eyebrow in faint surprise, as if the insect had just questioned her authority. She turned back to her husband, who was scrolling through his phone. Elena let out a slow, quiet breath. The other servers were terrified of Serafina. They saw a monster, a queen, a goddess. Elena Sanchez saw something very different. She saw a target. She saw the woman who had destroyed her family, and she saw, for the first time in 5 years, an opportunity. Elena Sanchez was not a waitress. To be precise, she was a waitress, but it was not who she was. 5 years ago, Elena Sanchez had been Elena Rios. She had been a 2L at Columbia Law, top 5% of her class, with a coveted summer associate offer from Cravath, Swain and Moore. She had been the daughter of David Rios, the brilliant, gentle founder of Rios Dynamics, a small but revolutionary biotech firm that had developed a breakthrough algorithm for predictive genetic modeling. He was on the verge of a partnership with Pfizer that would have made them wealthy beyond their dreams. Then the Vanderbilts had arrived. It wasn't a hostile takeover, it was an annihilation. It started with a story planted in the Wall Street Journal about irregularities in Rios Dynamics' clinical trial data. Then came the anonymous tip to the SEC. An investigation was launched. The Pfizer deal evaporated overnight. David Rios' stock, which held his entire life savings, became worthless in a single trading session. The anonymous source who had leaked the irregular data was never found. But the buyer who swept in to pick up the company's valuable patents for pennies on the dollar, just before the SEC investigation cleared David of all wrongdoing, was a newly formed subsidiary of Vanderbilt Capital. David Rios, a man who had never so much as broken a speed limit, was ruined. His reputation was shattered. The lawsuits from shareholders, the foreclosures, the shame, it broke him. He suffered a massive stroke 2 years later, leaving him in a private and crushingly expensive care facility, staring blankly at a wall, unable to speak. Elena was forced to drop out of Columbia. Her name, Rios, was now associated with financial scandal. She couldn't get a job as a paralegal, let alone as a lawyer. The student loan companies, Sallie Mae, were ruthless. She was drowning. So she changed her name to her mother's maiden name, Sanchez. She took a job in the service industry, the one place where your past didn't matter as much as your ability to carry 4 plates. But Elena was not just surviving, she was hunting. She had spent the last 2 years of her life in a tiny, roach-infested studio in the Bronx working double shifts. Her one luxury was a corkboard hidden behind a cheap curtain. It wasn't covered in dreams. It was covered in a spider web of a conspiracy. Newspaper clippings, pictures of Serafina and Arthur, social calendars printed from page 6. She had studied them. She learned that Arthur was the public face, but Serafina was the will. Arthur was a shark, but Serafina was the pilot fish who whispered in his ear, pointing him toward the blood in the water. She had read that Serafina personally vetted every major acquisition, especially the distressed ones. She had found a small blog post from a disgruntled ex-Vanderbilt Capital analyst complaining about a sociopathic woman who ran the M&A team from her penthouse, a woman who had a specialty in manufacturing scandals. Elena needed to get close. She needed to confirm it. She didn't even know what she needed. Justice, revenge. She just knew she had to face the monster. It took her 6 months to get the job at Ethel. She had faked a resume, studied wine tasting from YouTube videos until she could talk tannins with a sommelier and practice carrying trays loaded with books in her tiny apartment. She had targeted Ethel specifically because, she knew from Town and Country articles, it was Serafina's favorite power spot. And now here she was, the ghost at the feast. Tonight was special. She knew from her research that the man sitting with the Vanderbilts was not just any guest. It was Thomas Harrison, the newly appointed head of the Yale Endowment, the single largest university endowment in the world. Harrison was famously principled, an old money academic who had been skeptical of vulture capitalists like Vanderbilt. Serafina was clearly putting on the full charm offensive. This wasn't just dinner, it was a hunt. She wanted Yale's money. Elena watched as Serafina regaled Harrison with a story. "The problem with this city, Thomas," Serafina said, her voice carrying just enough to be overheard, is the nouveau riche. They have no history, no breeding. They think because they sold an app, they can buy taste. Arthur Vanderbilt shifted uncomfortably. His own father had been a scrap metal dealer from Queens. Serafina's, as far as Elena could tell, had been a mid-level executive at Lehman Brothers before it collapsed. Her old money persona was a carefully constructed fabrication. This was Serafina's greatest performance. And Elena, the woman whose entire life Serafina had rewritten, was about to become her critic. The dinner progressed. Serafina was a masterful conductor, guiding the conversation, laughing at Harrison's dry jokes, making Arthur, who clearly wanted to talk business, stay on the topic of art and philanthropy. Elena moved silently, a shadow among the glittering tables. She served her own party, a quiet older couple celebrating an anniversary, with flawless, unobtrusive grace. But her ears were tuned to table one. The incident began, as it always did with Serafina, over something small. The sommelier, a nervous young man named Julian, had presented the 1990 Romane Conti. It was a $28,000 bottle of wine. He had decanted it with trembling hands. Serafina had let it breathe. She'd swirled the dark crimson liquid in her Riedel glass. She'd inhaled its bouquet. Then she'd taken a small, delicate sip. She did not spit it out. She did something worse. She set the glass down very, very slowly. A look of profound disappointment and disgust crossed her features. "Julian," she said, her voice a cold whisper that cut through the restaurant's murmur. Julian, who had been hovering anxiously, rushed over. "Mrs. Vanderbilt, is it to your liking?" "Liking?" Serafina let out a small, cruel laugh. She looked at Thomas Harrison. "This, Thomas, is the problem I was just discussing, a lack of standards." She turned back to Julian, her eyes like chips of obsidian. "This wine is corked." Julian paled. "Madam, I assure you, I checked." "Are you calling me a liar?" She repeated her signature move. "It's tainted. It tastes like wet cardboard. It's utterly undrinkable." Arthur sighed, rubbing his temples. "Serafina, please. I'm sure it's poison," she snapped, cutting her husband off. "And at this price, it's not just an error, it's fraud." Matteo was at the table in an instant. "Mrs. Vanderbilt, my deepest apologies. We will, of course, remove this from your bill. We will bring another." "Another?" Serafina scoffed. "From the same fraudulent case?" "I think not. This is precisely the kind of sloppiness that ruins a reputation. I expected better from Ethel." Julian looked as if he was about to be physically ill. This was his career. A complaint like this from this woman could get him blacklisted from every Michelin star restaurant in the city. "Madame, if I may," Julian stammered. "The cork seemed perfectly—" "I mean the bouquet?" "The bouquet is irrelevant," Serafina said, enjoying herself now. "The palate is flawed. My flawed. It's trichloroanisole. A child could taste it. Clearly you cannot. You should be fired." Julian's eyes welled with tears. He was finished. It was then that Elena moved. She hadn't planned it. It was an instinct. She saw the casual, bored cruelty on Serafina's face. The same boredom she imagined the woman had felt when she clicked send on the email that ruined her father. She saw a young man's life about to be destroyed. Not for a mistake, but for sport. Elena stepped forward from the shadows, a fresh water carafe in her hand. She moved to Serafina's table, not approaching Julian, but Mr. Harrison. "Mr. Harrison," Elena said, her voice clear, calm, and perfectly modulated. "Your water." Serafina's head snapped toward her. The entire table and the two adjacent tables stopped. An employee had dared to interrupt. "I beg your pardon." Serafina's voice dropped 2 octaves. "Who are you?" Elena filled Mr. Harrison's glass, her hand as steady as a surgeon's. She did not look at Serafina. "Elena Sanchez, ma'am. I am a server." "Then serve," Serafina hissed, "and do not interrupt your betters." Elena placed the carafe down. She turned her body slightly, not to face Serafina directly, but to include the whole table. "My apologies, Mrs. Vanderbilt. I overheard your concern about the Romane Conti. It's a terrible disappointment when a wine of that vintage presents a flaw." Matteo, from across the room, was making frantic cut-it motions with his hand. Elena ignored him. Serafina looked intrigued by this impudence. "And you, Elena Sanchez, are an expert now?" "No, ma'am, not at all," Elena said, her voice honey-smooth. "But I was curious, Julian," she said, turning to the sommelier, who looked at her like a drowning man. "May I see the cork?" Julian, dumbfounded, held it out. Elena merely glanced at it. She didn't touch it. Thank you. She turned back to Serafina. You are, of course, entirely correct, Mrs. Vanderbilt. The wine is flawed. Julian's face fell. Serafina smirked, victorious. Well, at least one of you has a functional, but it is not corked, Elena said, cutting her off. The smirk vanished. The silence in the dining room was now so profound, you could hear the Gore-Tex jacket of a tourist brushing against a chair 3 tables away. Serafina Vanderbilt stared at the waitress. It was a look that had frozen bank presidents and sent senators scrambling. It was a look of pure distilled venom. What? She said, her voice barely audible. Did you just say to me? Mateo was now sprinting toward the table, his face ashen. Mrs. Vanderbilt, this employee is new. She is fired. Please excuse. Stay where you are, Mateo, Serafina commanded, her eyes never leaving Elena's. I want to hear this. Explain yourself, girl. Now. Elena felt a strange, cold calm settle over her. This was it. The precipice. She had just thrown away her job, her anonymity. But as she looked at Serafina's enraged face, she felt, for the first time in 5 years, a flicker of power. As I said, ma'am, Elena said, her voice remaining perfectly respectful, your palate is exceptional, but the flaw is not TCA. There is no wet cardboard taint. The cork is clean. I know what I taste, Serafina shot back, her voice rising. The pretense of old money elegance was cracking. What you are tasting, Elena continued, as if explaining a weather report, is Brettanomyces. It's a yeast spoilage. In this particular bottle, it's presenting as a slightly medicinal or Band-Aid aroma, which can be confused with a mild corking, especially when the wine is first opened. She glanced at Mr. Harrison, who was now watching Elena with laser-focused academic interest. The 1990 DRCs are notorious for bottle variation, and Brett was a common issue in that particular seller's bottling run. It's not a fake bottle, and it's not Julian's fault. It's simply an unlucky draw. Julian was staring at Elena, his mouth open. She had, just in 30 seconds, perfectly diagnosed a complex enological flaw that had stumped him. Serafina was speechless, but only for a moment. She was not enraged because she was wrong. She was enraged because a servant had corrected her, and worse, had done so publicly. How dare you? Serafina seethed. She decided to go on the offensive, to crush this impertinent girl. You stand there in your polyester uniform and lecture me on wine? Me? She turned to Harrison, forcing a laugh. It's absurd. This is what I mean. They hire anyone. This girl probably thinks Screaming Eagle is an energy drink. The table chuckled nervously. Serafina, sensing she had the audience back, turned for the kill. I have been drinking, collecting, and cellaring wines since before you were born. My grandfather, the diplomat Baron von Schreiber, taught me to spot fakes at his estate in Geneva. I have forgotten more about wine than you will ever know. This was the moment Elena had studied the corkboard for. She had read every article, every page 6 mention, every Vogue profile. She knew the script. Ah, yes, Elena said, a flicker of a smile touching her lips. Baron von Schreiber, your maternal grandfather. I read the Vogue interview you gave last May, the one about your family's collection. Serafina beamed. That's right, an impeccable collection. Unlike this swill, I found that interview so fascinating, Elena said, her voice still quiet, but now it carried. The entire restaurant was listening. You mentioned your 21st birthday and your grandfather serving the legendary Chateau Margaux 1982. You described the hint of violet and graphite and how it cemented your love for first growths. She has a remarkable memory, Serafina said to Harrison, preening. See, I do know what I'm talking about. That's the part I found so interesting, Elena said. She took a small, deliberate step closer to the table. Because I was a law student, I specialize in financial records and probate law. It's a hobby. She looked Serafina directly in the eyes. The warmth was gone. Her voice was now surgical steel. Your maternal grandfather was not Baron von Schreiber. His name was Martin Schreiber. He was a mid-level loans officer at Chase Manhattan in Scarsdale. He passed away in 1998, and his estate, according to New York surrogate's court records, consisted of a 2,000-square-foot colonial, a 1994 Buick LeSabre, and $40,000 in U.S. savings bonds. There was no estate in Geneva. There was no impeccable collection. The blood drained from Serafina's face. Arthur Vanderbilt, who had been on his phone, slowly looked up. Elena wasn't finished. And your father, she continued. Richard Dunn didn't have an old money collection either. He was an executive at Lehman Brothers. When it collapsed in 2008, his entire portfolio was liquidated to cover his margin calls. The Sotheby's auction records are public. He sold everything. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. The family collection you speak of, it is magnificent, but it has no history. It was purchased by Mr. Arthur Vanderbilt at a Christie's auction in 2017 from the estate of the late tech billionaire Saul Goldman. You haven't been cellaring these wines since you were a child. You've owned them for less than 7 years. The restaurant was a tomb. Chloe, the socialite at the next table, had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with malicious glee. Thomas Harrison was staring at Serafina, his expression one of profound distaste. Serafina's entire carefully constructed identity, the old money, the breeding, the history, had just been dismantled in front of her peers by a waitress. All her social power was derived from this myth, and Elena had just held it up to the light and revealed it as a cheap fake. Elena leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper for Serafina's ears only. You are right about one thing, though, Mrs. Vanderbilt. You do know how to spot a flaw, because you are one. She straightened up. She looked at Matteo, who was frozen in a rictus of terror and awe. I believe I'm fired, Matteo. Matteo just gaped. Serafina's face was a mask of purple, strangled rage. She was trembling. She couldn't speak. She, the woman whose words could end empires, had no words. She did the only thing she could. She let out a choked, animalistic sound, threw her napkin onto the table, and stormed out of the restaurant, leaving her husband, her guest, and her entire reputation in ruins behind her. Elena watched her go. Then she turned, walked calmly to the service station, untied her apron, and placed it on the counter. She looked at Julian, the sommelier, who was staring at her as if she were a god. Elena just nodded. Then she walked out the staff exit into the cool night air, the adrenaline finally hitting her. She had done it. She had made the queen look foolish. She had also just, she realized, declared war. The euphoria lasted for approximately 12 hours. Elena woke up the next morning in her tiny Bronx studio to the sound of her phone vibrating itself off the nightstand. It was a text from Matteo. Elena, I am so sorry. You are blacklisted. She called every restaurant owner I know. Ethel, Per Se, Le Bernardin, all of them. Don't even try. Good luck. A cold dread began to seep into her bones, heavier than the adrenaline had been. She had won the battle, but Serafina Vanderbilt was about to deploy her entire army. She went to her laptop to check her bank balance. She had to make rent, and she needed to send money to her father's care facility. When she tried to log into her Chase bank account, a red banner appeared. Account frozen. Please contact your branch. Ursuus Fraud Investigation 800-81B. No, Elena whispered. She tried again, the same message. She called the bank. After an hour on hold, a cold customer service agent informed her that a major irregularity had been flagged on her account linked to her Social Security number. All her funds were locked pending an investigation that could take 6 to 8 weeks. Her paycheck from Ethel, her savings, everything gone. She knew with chilling certainty that Serafina had made one phone call. Arthur Vanderbilt sat on the J.P. Morgan Chase advisory board. Panic began to rise in her throat. She got dressed, her hands shaking, and ran down to the corner bodega to use the ATM, hoping her card would work. Insufficient funds. Her phone buzzed again. It was her landlord. Miss Sanchez, yeah, hi. Listen, we just did an audit of our leases. It seems there was a clerical error with your application. We're terminating your lease effective in 48 hours. You need to be out by Friday. What? You can't do that? Elena yelled into the phone. My lease is good for 6 more months. Says here it's month to month and we're terminating. Sorry, kid. My hands are tied. The line clicked dead. This was Serafina's real power. It wasn't the snobbery or the social cuts. It was this, the silent, bureaucratic violence, the ability to push a button and erase a person. In less than a day, Elena Sanchez was unemployed, broke, and about to be homeless. She was being systematically dismantled. She spent the day in a daze, trying to call legal aid. No one would take a case against a landlord with such flimsy cause. and trying to find a temp job. Even the temp agencies told her their systems were down. By evening, she was sitting on her apartment floor eating stale crackers, the corkboard of her enemies staring back at her. She had been a fool. She had won nothing. She had corrected a woman about wine, and in return, that woman was making her disappear. Just as she was contemplating selling her laptop, her last real possession, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your performance was impressive. My wife's theatrics are tiresome. Elena's blood ran cold. A second text came through. She is not just tiresome. She is a liability. You exposed her as a fraud. I suspect you know a thing or two about frauds. Elena's thumbs trembled. Who is this? This is the man who bought Saul Goldman's wine. The Carlisle, 9 o'clock p.m. Regent Suite. Come alone. It was Arthur Vanderbilt. A trap, a threat, a lawsuit. It didn't matter. She had nothing left to lose. She had 48 hours until she was on the street. She put on her only decent outfit, the black slacks and white blouse she'd worn to the Ethel interview, and took the subway downtown. The Carlisle was old world money, quiet and discreet. Elena walked through the lobby feeling intensely out of place, but she held her head high, mimicking the confidence she'd projected at the restaurant. She took the elevator to the Regent Suite. The door was ajar. She pushed it open. Arthur Vanderbilt was standing by the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, looking out over the glittering lights of Central Park. He was not in his power suit. He wore a cashmere sweater and slacks. He looked, for the first time, like a man. And not a monolith. Mr. Vanderbilt, Elena said, her voice steady. He turned. His eyes were tired but incredibly sharp. He gestured to a chair. Miss Sanchez. Or is it Miss Rios? Elena's heart stopped. She remained standing. You know, I make it my business to know, Arthur said. He took a sip of his scotch. I ran a background check on you the moment my wife stormed out. Your law school records, your father, David Rios, Rios Dynamics. Yes, I know. Then you know what you did to him, Elena said, her voice shaking with a rage she hadn't let herself feel. What Vanderbilt Capital did. Yes, Arthur said, his face unreadable. It was a successful acquisition. It was a criminal demolition. You fabricated a scandal. You destroyed my father's reputation and his life. You stole his work. I did not, Arthur said, turning to face her fully. My company did. But the person who orchestrated it, the one who found the disgruntled employee, paid him actually to leak fabricated data to the WSJ, the one who anonymously tipped the SEC. He paused, letting the silence stretch. That was not me. That was Serafina. Elena stared at him, confused. What? Why what? Why that? Because I wanted the company. But I was willing to negotiate, Arthur said, a new bitterness in his voice. I saw the value in your father's algorithm. I was prepared to make him a rich man. But Serafina, she doesn't like to buy. She likes to take. She saw it as a game. Why pay billions when you can get it for millions? She manufactured the scandal, created the distressed asset scenario, and presented it to my board as a vulture opportunity. It was brilliant and ruthless, and she did it all without my name ever touching it. Why are you telling me this? Elena asked, her mind reeling. Because, Arthur said, walking to his desk, last night you did something I've been unable to do for 10 years. You shut her up, you exposed her, and you did it with facts. He gestured to the city. My wife is a performer. Her old money persona is her armor. Her power comes from the myth she's built. You put a crack in that myth, but she's not just a social liability anymore. She's a financial one. He tossed a thin file onto the desk. Serafina runs the Vanderbilt Family Foundation. It's our philanthropic arm. It's also her personal social weapon. She controls a $2 billion endowment. He leaned in, and she is stealing from it. Elena looked at the file. It showed a few internal memos, but nothing concrete. She's gotten arrogant, Arthur continued. Sloppy. She's been funding her lifestyle, her clothes, her art, her friends' consulting businesses, directly from the foundation's operating budget. She's moving money to offshore shell corporations. Goldman Sachs is our bank, and they've flagged it, but they won't act because of me. It's embezzlement. It's wire fraud. And if it comes out, it won't just destroy her. It will destroy me. It will destroy Vanderbilt Capital. Why don't you stop her? Elena asked. I can't. Arthur slammed his hand on the desk. We have a post-nuptial agreement. She controls the foundation. If I move against her, she'll go public, claim I'm the one manipulating funds, and burn the whole company to the ground just to spite me. She's a scorpion. It's her nature. He looked at Elena, his eyes calculating. But you're a ghost. You're Elena Sanchez, the fired waitress. You're Elena Rios, the victim. You're the law student who knows probate records and financial statements. You have every reason to want to destroy her, and you have nothing left to lose because she took it all. What do you want? Elena said, finally understanding. I want you to find the proof, not these memos, the real proof, the bank statements, the wire transfers, the link between the foundation and her personal spending. You want me to be your private investigator? Elena said. You want me to take all the risk. I want you to get your justice, Arthur countered. You find me the gun, I'll pull the trigger. You give me the evidence, irrefutable, public-ready evidence that Serafina is embezzling. You expose her and her only. And in return, one, I will unfreeze your bank account and restore your credit by morning. I will see to it you have a new, secure apartment and a living stipend. You will work for me off the books. Elena's heart was pounding. Two, Arthur said, the moment she is arrested, I will file for divorce, and as part of the corporate restructuring that follows, I will return the patents for Rios Dynamics to you, free and clear. Elena could barely breathe. Her father's work. And three, Arthur said, writing a number on a piece of paper and sliding it across the desk. A settlement for your father, for his care, for your silence about my involvement. Elena looked at the number. It was enough to care for her father for the rest of his life. It was enough to restart the company. She tried to erase you, Ms. Rios, Arthur said. She thinks you're a bug. I'm offering you the chance to be the boot. I'll need access, Elena said, her mind already working. Access to the foundation servers, their accounting, their bank portals. Arthur smiled, a thin, cold smile. I already have it. I just need someone smart enough to navigate it and someone expendable enough to use it. I'm not expendable, Elena said. Prove it, Arthur replied. Find the smoking gun and find it before the annual foundation gala. That's when she'll be on stage in front of the whole world talking about transparency. I want you to give that word a new meaning. The next 2 weeks were not a reprieve. They were a crucible. Arthur Vanderbilt was true to his word, with the chilling efficiency of a man who moved mountains without effort. By morning, Elena's bank account was unlocked. By noon, a messenger delivered a key card and a lease signed in a corporate name for a sterile, high-end apartment in a glass tower in Midtown, a gilded cage. By afternoon, a new encrypted laptop and a single heavy hard drive were left with her doorman. Elena didn't see the apartment as a luxury. She saw it as a clean room, a place of operation. She didn't unpack. She set up the laptop on the marble kitchen island, plugged in the drive, and her old life vanished, replaced by a digital war room. For 13 days she worked. She slept in 3-hour increments, fueled by black coffee and the ice-cold fury that had been her only companion for 5 years. Arthur had provided a mirror of the Vanderbilt Foundation servers. At first, it was impenetrable. The books were pristine, the donations were real, millions went to the Met, to Columbia, to cancer research. The accounting, handled by Deloitte, was airtight. Serafina was no fool. She was insulated by layers of plausible deniability. Elena realized she was looking in the wrong place. She wasn't looking for a criminal. She was looking for a socialite. She opened a new window. She pulled up page 6, Town and Country, and, most importantly, Serafina Vanderbilt's own flawless, curated Instagram feed. She began her legal research not in the ledgers but in the photo captions. She created a new document, a split screen. On one side, Serafina's life, on the other, the foundation's expenses. February 10th, Serafina posts a photo of herself and 5 socialite friends on a yacht in St. Bart's. The caption, a much-needed planning session for the Foundation's spring initiatives. #philanthropy, #est Bart's @Do Good Girls Trip. February 8th, Elena, searching the server, finds a wire transfer. The Vanderbilt Foundation pays $200,000 from the discretionary grant fund to a vendor named Elysian Events, LLC. The memo line, event scoping and logistics. Elena's blood ran cold. This was it, she dug. Elysian Events, LLC was registered in Delaware 2 days before the payment. Its agent was a P.O. box. It had no website, no history. It was a phantom. Elena then did a reverse image search on the yacht. She found the charter company. She called, pretending to be a Vogue fact checker. The charter for that specific yacht for that specific week. The fee was $195,000. Serafina hadn't just used foundation money. She had laundered it through a shell corporation she'd created, taking a $5,000 kickback for herself. The floodgates opened. Elena was no longer a lawyer. She was a hunter. The pattern was everywhere, hidden in plain sight. March 2nd, Serafina is photographed at the Sotheby's Contemporary Art Auction, purchasing a small Jeff Koons sculpture for $1.2 million. March 1st, the foundation pays $1.2 million to Capital Art Imports, another Delaware shell, for public art acquisition. The sculpture, Elena noted, was now hanging in Serafina's private penthouse, as seen in a recent Architectural Digest spread. And then the final, arrogant, beautiful mistake. May 1st, the Met Gala. Serafina's gown, a custom Dior, is the talk of the town. April 28th, the foundation pays $85,000 to Sarah's Finery LLC. Serafina had named the shell company after herself. It was brazen. It was arrogant. It was, Elena thought with a grim smile, tacky, and it was the final nail. Elena found the digital transfer forms for every single payment. Each one required a single manual override approval, and each one bore the same digital signature, S. Vanderbilt. Elena compiled her evidence. She didn't write a legal brief. She created a simple, devastating PowerPoint presentation. Bank statements, wire transfers, fake invoices, Instagram photos, page 6 clippings, and on every slide, Serafina's own signature. She encrypted the file and sent it to the anonymous email address Arthur had provided. The reply came 30 seconds later. It was not a thank you, it was an order. Gala. Invitation is with your doorman. AV Tech will be expecting a tribute video from Mr. Vanderbilt's personal office. Ensure it is on a standard USB. 8 o'clock p.m. Black tie. Arthur wasn't just giving her the stage. He was ensuring his own hands were clean. He would be the surprised husband betrayed alongside everyone else. Elena was the weapon, and he was simply pulling the trigger. The night of the Vanderbilt Foundation Gala was the beating heart of the New York social calendar. It was held in the Celeste Bartos Forum of the New York Public Library, a magnificent soaring room with marble arches and a celestial painted ceiling. Elena did not enter as a waitress. She entered as Ms. Elena Rios. Arthur's wardrobe allowance had been put to good use. She wore a simple, sleeveless black Armani gown. It wasn't a dress, it was armor. Her hair was pulled back into the same severe, no-nonsense bun she'd worn at Ethel. She wore her mother's simple pearl earrings. She was a ghost in the machine, a specter of justice walking among the titans who thought themselves gods. The room was a sea of black tie, diamonds, and power. She saw them all, tech billionaires, senators, hedge fund managers, and the socialites who orbited them. And then she saw her. Serafina Vanderbilt was holding court, a vision in a blood-red Schiaparelli gown, the Vanderbilt ice diamonds glittering at her throat. She was radiant, powerful, and completely in her element. She was laughing, clutching the arm of Thomas Harrison, the Yale endowment head. He was beaming, utterly charmed. The Ethel incident, Elena realized, had been forgotten by everyone except the people who were there. Serafina's gaze swept the room, a monarch scanning her subjects. Her eyes passed right over Elena, flickered, and moved on. Elena, out of uniform, was invisible. She was just another pretty, dark-haired girl in a black dress, unworthy of a second glance. The irony tasted like victory. Elena moved to the back near the AV booth. She found the tech, a young man in a headset. "Hi," Elena said, her voice calm. "I have the last-minute tribute video from Mr. Vanderbilt's office." The tech, stressed and bored, barely looked at her. "Oh, right, the surprise. You got the USB?" Elena handed it to him. "Got it," he said, plugging it in. "Mr. V's assistant said he'll give the signal from the stage. He'll touch his left ear." Elena's blood froze. Arthur was in complete control. He wasn't just letting it happen. He was directing it. This wasn't her revenge. She was a performer in his opera. She nodded. "Thank you." She found her seat. Table 3, front and center. Arthur had placed her perfectly. After the dinner, Serafina took the stage to a wave of thunderous applause. The massive screen behind her glowed with the Foundation's logo, a golden stylized V. "Philanthropy," Serafina began. her voice dripping with manufactured sincerity, is not just about writing checks. It is about trust. It is about accountability. It is about transparency. She was brilliant. She spoke of the children they'd helped, the cures they'd funded. The room was wrapped. Elena felt a wave of nausea. This was the performance of a master. We the fortunate, Serafina concluded, have a sacred duty, and I am so very, very proud to be your steward. Thank you. The applause was deafening. Serafina beamed, bathing in it. Thank you. I believe we have time for one or two questions. A Times reporter raised her hand, but before she could be called, Elena stood up. Her chair scraping on the stone floor was the only sound. The room, sensing a shift, fell quiet. Mrs. Vanderbilt, Elena said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the cavernous hall. Serafina squinted into the lights, the smile frozen on her face. She didn't recognize her. I'm sorry, Elena said, projecting her voice. Elena Rios. A waiter, moving to stop her, paused, recognizing the drama and stepping back. We met at Ethel. You may remember me. I was the waitress who corrected you on your wine. A wave of shocked, delighted murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was that girl, the Page 6 legend. Serafina's face turned to stone. The blood drained from it, leaving a chalky, pale mask. Security, she hissed into the mic. This woman is confused. She needs to be removed. I'm not confused, Serafina, Elena said. The use of the first name, a collective gasp. I'm just a guest, and I have a question. You spoke so beautifully about transparency. On the dais, Elena saw Arthur Vanderbilt's hand move. He subtly, slowly touched his left ear. My question is about Alessian Events, LLC, Elena said, her voice now amplified as a tech, sensing a moment, had turned up her podium mic. Can you tell the room if that's a registered charity? Serafina spun around. The massive screen behind her flickered. The golden V was gone, replaced by the Elysian Events Delaware registration. What is this? Serafina stammered. That, Elena said as the screen clicked to the $200,000 wire transfer, is the down payment for your planning session in St. Bart's, paid for by the Foundation's discretionary fund and by your signature. Serafina's signature, massive and damning, filled the screen. Click. The screen changed. A photo from Serafina's own Instagram, her and her friends on the yacht. Champagne. Oh yes. Blessed. Click. The invoice for the yacht billed to Elysian Events. The room was a tomb. And then there's Sarah's Finery, LLC, Elena continued, her voice cold, surgical. I was wondering if the Dior gown you wore to the Met Gala, was that a discretionary grant? Click. The invoice for $85,000. Click. The wire transfer. Click. The signature. Serafina was hyperventilating, her hand at her throat, the diamonds now looking like a beautiful noose. Lies, forgery. This is Arthur. Arthur, tell them. Tell these people. Do something. This was the moment. Every eye in the room swiveled to Arthur Vanderbilt, the king. He stood up, his face a mask of profound, tragic sorrow. He walked to the main podium, took the microphone from his wife's trembling hand. My friends, he said, his voice breaking just enough. Members of the board, ladies and gentlemen. He paused as if gathering himself. It is with the heaviest heart that I must confirm this betrayal appears to be true. A collective horrified gasp. No, Serafina shrieked. It was not a word. It was an animal sound of pure agony. No, you knew, you liar. This was us. We did this, the Rios deal. We did it together. She had just publicly confessed to destroying Elena's father. Arthur looked at her, his eyes dead, and his voice dropped to a whisper that the mic caught perfectly. Serafina, you are clearly unwell. You have been under so much stress. He turned back to the crowd. My wife has not been herself. I had no idea the extent of the sickness had gone. He had painted her as a lone, crazed embezzler. As of this morning, Arthur continued, his voice now like steel, I, on behalf of the board, filed a report with the New York Attorney General's office. I had hoped, I had prayed. It was all a terrible mistake. He had insulated himself. He had already gone to the police. He was the whistleblower, the victim. He looked past the crowd to the main doors, but it seems it is not. As if on cue, the grand oak doors of the library swung open. Two men in dark suits, FBI, not security, began to walk calmly and purposefully down the center aisle. Serafina steering them. All right, the rage, the denial, it all collapsed into a single terrifying understanding. She was not just caught, she was outplayed. She looked at her husband. You bastard. Then she looked at Elena, her eyes filled with tears of rage suddenly cleared. And in that moment, Elena saw something new. It wasn't just hatred, it was respect. The terrifying, cold respect of one predator for another. The agents reached the stage. Mrs. Vanderbilt, we need you to come with us. As they gently took her arms, Serafina Vanderbilt, the Queen of New York, her red dress now looking like a shroud, laughed. A cold, high, terrible laugh. Elena Rios, her job done, placed the microphone gently on the table. She turned, her black dress blending into the shadows. While the entire world watched the Queen fall, Elena walked against the tide of chaos out the doors of the library and into the cool, quiet night air. She didn't look back. Checkmate. Serafina Vanderbilt was found guilty on 14 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. Her entire social world, built on a foundation of lies, collapsed overnight. She was stripped of her titles, her wealth, and her freedom. And Elena, she not only got her father's company back, but she also finished her law degree. She proved that you don't need a billion-dollar name or an old money pedigree to win. Sometimes all you need is the truth, a bit of courage, and the patience to wait for the perfect moment. It's a story that proves that no one is untouchable. The higher they climb on their mountain of lies, the harder they fall. What did you think of Elena's revenge? Was it too calculated, or was it perfect justice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. In the electrifying saga of Elena Rios, a resilient young woman stripped of her future by cruelty and deception, we uncover a deeply emotional life lesson. The most powerful revenge isn't destruction, but the quiet, unwavering pursuit of truth that turns the tables on those who believe they're untouchable. For years, Elena carried the unbearable weight of her father's ruined legacy, his brilliant mind reduced to silence by a manufactured scandal orchestrated by Serafina Vanderbilt's ruthless ambition. Posing as an ordinary waitress, Elena endured humiliation, hiding her pain behind a mask of service, all while meticulously gathering the strength to strike back, not with K's, but with irrefutable facts that expose the Queen's empire of lies. In that climactic gala moment, as Serafina's facade crumbled under the weight of her own embezzlement and hypocrisy, Elena didn't gloat. She simply walked away, reclaiming her father's patents, her dignity, and her path to becoming the lawyer she was meant to be. This story stirs the soul because it mirrors the hidden struggles so many of us face, the betrayals that try to bury our dreams, the systems that favor the powerful, and the long, lonely nights wondering if justice will ever come. It reminds us that true strength lies in patience, intelligence, and moral courage, rising not by becoming the monster, but by shining a light so bright it reveals them for who they are. No matter how high the wicked climb on foundations of deceit, truth has a way of pulling them down, and those who endure with grace often emerge stronger, freer, and ready to build something real. What touched you most in Elena's journey? The meticulous planning, the public exposure, or her alliance with the unexpected? Was her calculated justice flawless, or would you have chosen a different path? Drop your thoughts and personal stories of overcoming betrayal in the comments. We truly read and cherish every one. If this tale of quiet triumph and poetic justice moved your heart, smash that like button, share it with someone battling their own injustices, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping real-life stories of resilience and redemption. New episodes every week. Join the family and never miss the inspiration.